Jaxar Thrum had never been one for early mornings. Hell, he'd never been one for mornings at all. But here he was, in the cramped command center of Mercury Base, nursing a cup of something vaguely resembling coffee. They called it Brew 23, probably because it took 23 different chemicals to make it taste like something you'd only drink if you hated yourself or loved danger. Morning Chief, mumbled Sloane, the resident cynic and unofficial queen of sarcasm. She slid into the seat opposite him, her jumpsuit still creased from too many hours of sleep and not enough care. Brew 23 again, you must really hate yourself. Keeps the blood circulating, Jax replied, raising his mug in a half-hearted salute. Besides, it's this or that sludge Pascal whipped up yesterday. I hear it was potent enough to peel paint off the walls. Pascal, their resident chemist, was more mad scientist than barista. His concoctions were legendary for all the wrong reasons. Sloane smirked. Yeah, but it did wonders for the ventilation. Outside the reinforced walls of their hidey hole, the sun scorched the planet's surface with enough heat to make hell look like a spa day. But inside, it was just another day in paradise. If your idea of paradise was a metal canister buried beneath the ground, surrounded by enough technology to make your average IT nerd drool, but with all the comforts of a prison cell. Jaxar glanced at the status screens. They flickered with an array of data that only he and a handful of others in their sorry band of survivors truly understood. All systems operational, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Sloane leaned back, folding her arms. Ah, Mercury Base, still here, still going unnoticed by those alien bastards. It's almost like they don't know we exist, or maybe they just don't care. Ignorance is bliss, Jax said, and in our case it's also survival, not that survival was guaranteed. Earth was a memory now, a footnote in the universe, thanks to the Zarklot Empire and their peculiar habit of wiping out civilizations that annoyed them. And humans, being the endlessly creative nuisances they were, had done just that. Remember Earth, Jax? Sloane asked, a rare note of nostalgia creeping into her voice. Like a bad dream, Jax replied, but his eyes softened. The beaches, the forests, the endless bureaucracy, those were the days. And now, here we are, she said, gesturing around the cramped room. Living in a tin can on the hottest rock in the solar system, with the universe's worst case of sunburn just outside, Jax chuckled. Hey, at least we don't have to worry about rainy days. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Pascal, carrying a tray of nutrient bars that looked about as appetizing as they sounded. Breakfast is served, he announced with a flourish. Great, Sloane sighed, accepting one with the enthusiasm of a condemned prisoner. More cardboard masquerading as food. It's Colonel Cardboard to you, Pascal shot back. Besides, I added a little something to spice it up. Worried, Jax muttered under his breath. Very worried. They ate in relative silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Jax thought about their chances of being discovered, which were slim but not impossible. They had chosen Mercury for its inhospitable conditions, believing no sane being would bother looking for life here. So far, they'd been right. You ever think about what we're doing here, Jax? Pascal asked suddenly. Every damn day, Jax replied without hesitation. And, Sloane prompted, and I think it's a miracle we're still alive. A testament to human stubbornness, if nothing else. Sloane snorted. Stubbornness is putting it mildly. It's more like a cosmic-level hard-hittedness. Well, when the universe decides to throw you into the deepest pit, you climb your way out, Jax said, his voice steely, or at least dig a comfortable hole and wait for the storm to pass. Pascal grinned, and here we are digging our hole. The comms panel beeped and Sloane leaned forward. Incoming transmission. Everyone tensed. A message meant someone knew they were there, and not many someones were good. Jax punched a few buttons, and the static-filled screen resolved into the grinning face of Norv, their scout and part-time troublemaker, stuck on the surface for a week on recon duty. Hey, family, miss me yet? Like a hole in the head, Sloane shot back. What's the news, Norv? Jax asked, leaning in. Spotted a new Zarklot convoy a few hundred clicks west. They're doing something big, but not on top of us. Yet, how big? Pascal asked, frowning. Big enough to make me think they're compensating for something, Norv joked, but his eyes were serious. Jax ran a hand through his hair. Keep an eye on them. Let us know if they start getting too friendly. Will do, Chief, Norv said, before cutting the connection. Well, that's not ominous at all, Sloane muttered. Pascal picked up his tray, now empty of the nutrient bars. Guess it's time to start prepping for visitors, just in case. Jax nodded, staring at the screen. Yeah, but let's keep our heads down, play it safe. Last thing we need is to invite their curiosity. And here I thought I was going to get bored today, Sloane grumbled. You and me both, Jax replied, clapping his hands together. All right, back to work, people. Let's keep this rock spinning. As they dispersed, Jax lingered, staring out at the dead, cracked surface displayed on the monitors. Mercury wasn't much to look at, but for now it was home. And there were worse places to be, like anywhere else in the galaxy at the moment. Hey, Jax, Sloane called from the doorway. Yeah, you think we'll make it through this? Jax hesitated, then shrugged. Why not? We've got Brew 23 kernel cardboard and enough sarcasm to fuel a starship. Good enough for me, she said with a smile, disappearing down the corridor. Jax watched her go, then turned back to the screens. The Zarklot threat loomed large, but it wasn't the first time humanity had faced extinction. They'd bounce back. They always did. It was either that or go quietly into the night, and if there was one thing humans weren't, it was quiet. He sipped his brew, grimacing at the taste. At least some things never changed. Jaxar Thrum was about to find out just how much stranger a day could get when the status screen started flickering like a cheap neon sign in a dodgy part of town. His first thought was that Pascal had finally succeeded in his lifelong mission to accidentally blow them all to hell. But alas, the universe had different plans. "Hey, Jax," Sloane called, leaning against the doorway with her usual air of practiced disinterest. "You seeing this?" Jax squinted at the screen, tapping at it like that might make the nonsense go away. "Unless my eyes are lying more than a politician at election time, I'd say we've got company." She stepped closer, peering at the jumble of meaningless characters and patterns on the display. "Looks like gibberish." Or maybe Pascal's new cookbook. Pascal, who had been lurking around the corner, poked his head into the room. "I heard that. My recipes are a delicate balance of science and probable food poisoning." "Yeah, well, someone's sending us cosmic spam," Jax said, turning back to the screen. "Question is who? Could be the Zarklot," Sloane suggested, folding her arms. "They might be getting jittery or bored." "Or both," Jax frowned. "If they're sending signals, it means they're looking for something, and I doubt it's a new recipe for disaster stew." Pascal scratched his head. "Maybe they're just trying to find the nearest gas station, or they've got a new hobby, stargazing with a side of genocide." "Charming," Jax muttered. "But either way, we've got to figure out what they're up to. If they get too nosy, our little hideout might become the main attraction." Sloane sighed, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else, maybe even on the sun itself. "So what's the plan, Chief? We can't exactly hang a do not disturb sign on the solar system." "Recon," Jax said, rolling the word around like it was a bitter pill. "We need to make sure they're not sniffing around Mercury." Pascal crossed his arms, raising an eyebrow. "And by we you mean Norv, right? Because he's the one already frying his ass off topside." "Norv's good, but I want another set of eyes up there. Just in case," Jax replied, rubbing the back of his neck. "We can't afford to get blindsided." Sloane gave him a sideways glance. "You volunteering, or is this one of those inspire your troops moments where you send someone else to do the dirty work?" Jax sighed. "I'll go. I could use the fresh air." "You do realize there's no air up there, right?" Pascal asked, smirking. "Details," Jax said, waving a hand. "But seriously, I'll take a look." Better safe than vaporized. The room went quiet for a moment, everyone letting the reality of their situation sink in. Funny how the looming threat of complete annihilation could put a damper on conversation. "All right then," Sloane said, breaking the silence. "When do we start this ill-advised adventure?" Jax shrugged. "No time like the present. Besides, I haven't been on a good suicide mission in weeks." Pascal nodded slowly. "I'll get the gear ready. Just make sure you don't do anything stupid." Jax grinned. "Come on, Pascal. Stupid is what we do best." Outside the base, Mercury's surface was every bit the nightmare Jax remembered. Baking heat, blinding light, and a landscape that could only be described as aggressively unfriendly. It was like the universe's way of saying, "Go home, you're not welcome here." Jax adjusted his visor, the suit's cooling system struggling to keep him from melting into a puddle of regrets. He spotted Norv a short distance away, tinkering with a small drone that looked like it had been through one too many asteroid fields. "Hey, Norv," Jax called, his voice crackling over the comms. Norv turned, giving a lazy salute. "Chief, didn't expect to see you up here in person. Hell, freeze over. Thought I'd check on your sunbathing progress. Don't want you getting too crispy." Norv chuckled, but his expression turned serious as he gestured to the horizon. "Zarklots have been moving around more than usual. Saw a couple of their ships doing flybys." "Bored or curious?" Jax asked, scanning the horizon himself. "Hard to say, but if they're curious, that could spell trouble for us." Jax nodded, looking thoughtful. "All right, let's get that drone up. I want eyes on whatever they're doing." Together, they worked to get the drone airborne, its rotors spinning to life with a comforting hum. As it took off, Jax couldn't shake the feeling that they were poking a very large, very angry bear with a stick. But then again, wasn't that what humans were best at? "You know, Jax," Norv said, watching the drone disappear into the sky. "One of these days, our luck's gonna run out." "Probably," Jax agreed. "But until then, let's keep acting like it won't." They monitored the drone's feed, watching as the barren landscape zoomed by. But before they could get comfortable, the screen flickered, showing something unexpected. "Structures. Alien ones." Norv whistled low. "Well, that's not a good sign." "No kidding," Jax said, eyeing the screen. "They're setting up shop. And that's too close for comfort. Think they know we're here? Norv asked, adjusting the feed for a better view. Jax frowned. If they don't yet, they will soon. We've got to do something before they get too cozy. Norv sighed. Any brilliant ideas, or is this where we run screaming? First, let's get this info back to base. We'll figure out our next move from there. As they packed up, Jax couldn't help but feel a growing pit in his stomach. The Zarklots were closer than they'd ever been, and it was only a matter of time before things got ugly. But for now, they'd play it cool. They had to. Back in the command center, the mood was tense. Jax paced the room, occasionally glancing at the status screens as if they might suddenly offer a solution to their predicament. No such luck. Sloane leaned against the wall, watching him with a mix of amusement and concern. So what's the plan, fearless leader? Do we throw a welcoming party or start praying? Jax stopped pacing long enough to rub his temples. We need to find a way to make Mercury seem less appealing. Maybe convince them there's nothing here worth finding. Pascal snorted from his corner where he was fiddling with something explosive-looking. I could arrange a little pyrotechnics display. You know, a get-lost-light show. Tempting, Jax said, but I'd rather not start a war unless we have to. Norv, who'd returned with him, leaned against the console. Could always play dead, worked for us so far, or we could just invite them in for Brew 23 and watch them run, Sloane suggested with a smirk. Jax couldn't help but chuckle at that. I'm sure that'd do the trick, but I'd rather not waste any. We might actually need it for morale. Sloane raised an eyebrow. Brew 23 as a morale booster. Now I've heard everything. Jax shook his head, trying to focus. We'll keep monitoring them. If they start looking our way, we'll have to act. Until then, we stick to the shadows. So, business as usual, Pascal said, looking thoughtful. Let's just hope they don't get a burst of curiosity. Curiosity killed the cat, but in this case it might just kill us, Norv remarked grimly. Or at least make things very uncomfortable, Sloane added. Jax took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation settle on his shoulders. All right, people, let's get back to it. We've got a planet to hide. As they got to work, the uneasy feeling in the pit of Jax's stomach refused to go away. The Zarklots were close, too close for comfort, and if they didn't play their cards right, they could end up as just another forgotten footnote in the universe's long history of failed civilizations. But until that day came, Jax would do what humans had always done best: survive, adapt, and make the universe regret ever underestimating them. Jaxar Thrum stood in the middle of the command center, glaring at the flickering status screens like they'd insulted his mother. The latest problem was almost laughable if it wasn't happening to them. Communications were failing, a spectacularly bad time for a chat line blackout with the Zarklots getting cozy next door. Great, he grumbled, slapping the side of a screen. It blinked twice like a dying animal and then went out completely. Pascal, I blame you. Pascal looked up from his corner, where he was rearranging what appeared to be explosive kitchenware. I was trying to make a souffle, not sabotage our comms. Probably just Mercury's charm. Sloane, ever the portrait of relaxed indifference, was perched on a desk, legs swinging. I don't know. Maybe the universe just hates us. It's a possibility, Jax admitted, stepping away from the screen before he got the urge to punch it. Where's Selby? We need someone who knows which end of a spanner to hold. Pascal shrugged, gesturing vaguely toward the bowels of the base. Probably crawling through the ducts, cursing our existence. Not long after, Selby Riffle appeared, a wiry figure with a face that seemed perpetually amused by some cosmic joke only he understood. He carried a toolbox that looked like it had survived a nuclear apocalypse, which, given their location, was entirely plausible. Got something for me, Chief? Selby asked, fiddling with a bit of wire like he was auditioning for a magician's gig. Yeah, the comms are down and we're one Zarklot sneeze away from being turned into cosmic dust. Selby arched an eyebrow. Well, isn't that a party pooper? What's your plan? Pray to the tech gods or hope for a miracle? Neither, Jax replied dryly. I'm hoping you've got some magic left in that toolbox of yours. Selby snorted and went to one of the panels, opening it with a pop that echoed like a gunshot. The mess of wires inside looked like a rat's nest, and he poked at them with the caution of a man defusing a bomb. Looks like the last maintenance crew was more interested in speed than longevity, Selby mused, tugging a cable free. Probably outsourced to the lowest bidder. I'll need some time, and a miracle wouldn't hurt. Great, Jax said, crossing his arms. Just what I wanted to hear. Sloane sighed, twirling a pen between her fingers. Seriously, how are we supposed to handle this? Smoke signals. We could try talking louder, Pascal offered helpfully. Jax glared at them both as Selby continued to work. Listen up, comedians. We need to get this fixed before the Zarklots decide Mercury would make a nice vacation spot. Selby glanced over his shoulder, grinning. Relax, Jax, we'll get it sorted. Worst case, I'll jerry-rig something. Might not hold forever, but should keep us alive long enough to die another day. Comforting, Sloane muttered, rolling her eyes. Selby was nothing if not resourceful. He was known for fixing things with whatever was at hand, which once included a bobby pin, 3 rubber bands, and a stick of gum. The man was a legend in his own right, if a slightly terrifying one. Jax leaned against the wall, watching as Selby's hands flew over the wires with the precision of a surgeon. "You've got a way of making me believe in miracles, Selby. That's what they pay me for," Selby replied, not looking up. "Well, that and my charming personality." Jax chuckled despite himself. He knew they were in deep trouble, but Selby's confidence was infectious. Even as sparks flew and the room smelled like burning plastic, he maintained his calm demeanor. After what felt like an eternity, Selby stepped back, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit. "All right, try it now." Jax went to the screen, tapping a few commands. This time, the status screen flickered but stayed on, displaying a mess of characters that, thankfully, included a few recognizable ones. "Looks better," Jax said cautiously. "Think it'll hold?" Selby shrugged, a lopsided grin on his face. "For now. But if a Zarklot sneezes in our direction, all bets are off." "Good enough for me," Jax said, offering a rare smile. "You deserve a medal, or a stiff drink," Selby countered. "Whichever's handier." Pascal, who'd been watching with a mix of awe and boredom, clapped Selby on the back. "Knew you had it in you, mate. Next time, though, maybe give us a heads up before you start playing God with wires." Selby laughed. "Where's the fun in that?" Sloane slid off the desk, stretching lazily. "So what's next, Jax? We wait and hope they don't decide we look like a fun target." "Pretty much," Jax said, his humor fading. "We keep monitoring, stay ready to move if we have to." Norv, who'd been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up. "And if they come knocking," Jax grimaced. "We let Pascal show off his pyrotechnics." "I knew they'd come in handy," Pascal said proudly, eyeing his collection of makeshift bombs. "Let's just hope we don't have to use them." Selby nodded in agreement. "I'd rather keep the fireworks for a celebration, not a eulogy." Jax couldn't argue with that. The threat loomed large, and every decision felt like balancing on a knife edge. But they'd faced worse odds before, and somehow they were still standing. For now, that was enough. "So," Selby said, breaking the silence, "what's the plan for tomorrow? More technical wizardry, or do we finally get a day off?" Jax considered that, a small grin creeping back onto his face. "Depends. How do you feel about fixing the air recyclers? They've been making noises that suggest they're planning a hostile takeover." Selby groaned, but his eyes gleamed with mischief. "Oh joy, more duct diving. My chiropractor's gonna love me." "You're a glutton for punishment," Norv commented, shaking his head. "Part of my charm," Selby replied. "Besides, keeps me busy." "God knows I'd go mad if I had time to think about our impending doom." "Cheers to that," Pascal said, raising an imaginary glass. Jax took a moment to look around the room at his ragtag team. They weren't heroes by any stretch of the imagination, just a bunch of misfits trying to get by, one crisis at a time. But they were his team, and somehow that made all the difference. "All right," Jax said, clapping his hands together. "Let's get back to it. We've got a planet to hide, remember." As they dispersed to their various tasks, Jax felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they'd get through this in one piece, or at least with enough left to patch together another miracle. The next morning, or what passed for morning in a place with no real day, they gathered in the command center. The repairs had held through the night, and for once the status screens weren't threatening to have an existential crisis. Pascal was the first to break the relative calm. "You know, I've been thinking." "Oh," Sloane said immediately. "Should we be worried?" "Very funny," Pascal replied with a mock glare. "What I meant was, maybe we should try sending out a signal, see if we can reach any of the other bases." Jax considered it, crossing his arms. "Might be worth a shot. If anyone else is still kicking, it'd be nice to know we're not the only ones playing hide-and-seek with the Zarklots." Selby nodded, fiddling with the controls. "Could work. Just need to be careful we don't accidentally invite them over for tea." "Right, because Brew 23 is really the high point of human culture," Sloane quipped. Norv, leaning over the console, looked thoughtful. "It's risky, but if it works we might learn something. Maybe there's another group out there with more problems than us." "Hard to imagine," Pascal said with a wry grin. "But stranger things have happened. Like us surviving for this long," Jax pointed out. "All right, let's give it a shot. Selby, think you can rig something?" Selby glanced at the panel, nodding. "Shouldn't be hard, I'll set it up. Might want to brace for some static, though." Jax leaned back against the console, watching as Selby worked his magic once again. It was a gamble, but then everything they did these days was a gamble. In a galaxy that seemed hell-bent on wiping them out, a little hope went a long way. As Selby tinkered with the comms, Sloane leaned closer to Jax. "You think there's really anyone out there?" "Could be," Jax said quietly. "Or we might just be shouting into the void." She nodded, seemingly unfazed. "Well, at least we're not going quietly." "No," Jax agreed, a grim determination in his voice. "We're definitely not doing that." After a few minutes that felt like hours, Selby gave a thumbs up. "All right, we're live. Fingers crossed." Jax activated the comms, sending out a simple message. "This is Mercury base. Anyone receiving, please respond." The silence that followed was so absolute it was almost deafening. They waited, tension coiled tight, each second stretching like an eternity. Then a burst of static crackled through the speakers, followed by a voice faint but unmistakably human. "Mercury Base, this is Alpha Station. We read you." Jax felt a surge of relief mixed with disbelief. For the first time in a long while, luck was on their side, at least temporarily. "Alpha Station, good to hear your voice," Jax replied, trying to keep his excitement in check. "What's your status?" The voice on the other end sounded tired but amused. "Surviving, for now anyway. Same old dance with the Zarklots. Join the club," Jax said, sharing a glance with his team. "We're hanging in there too. Anything new on your end?" "Not a lot. Same old cat-and-mouse game. But it's nice to know we're not the last ones standing." "Agreed," Jax said, feeling the weight of isolation lift slightly. "Let's keep this line open. We might need each other before long." "Copy that, Mercury. We'll be here." Jax ended the transmission, turning back to his crew. "All right, folks, we've got allies. Let's make sure we stay that way." Pascal grinned, tapping his makeshift bomb. "Better dust off the welcome mat then, just in case," Selby chuckled, returning to his tools. "Guess I'll have to keep this place running a little longer." Sloane crossed her arms, a rare smile tugging at her lips. "Looks like we're not done fighting yet." "No," Jax said, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Not by a long shot." As they set about their tasks, the mood was lighter than it had been in days. They weren't out of the woods yet, but at least they weren't alone. And in a universe filled with hostile aliens and flickering screens, that was something worth holding on to. The command center buzzed with a rare energy, a bit like a party in a graveyard. The successful contact with Alpha Station had everyone feeling almost hopeful, almost. But hope is a tricky little bastard, and just as they were contemplating the possibility of not dying in the next few days, the universe decided to remind them what kind of story this really was. Pax Fielder, the rookie, stood at the corner, fidgeting like he'd swallowed a live wire. His eyes darted around the room, finally landing on Jax R. Thrum. Jax," he started, voice barely above a whisper. "I might have done something, sort of. A mistake." The room went dead quiet. Even the status screens seemed to hold their breath. Jax turned slowly, like a predator sighting its next meal. "Mistake," he repeated, with the kind of calm that suggested impending violence. "What kind of mistake, Pax?" Pax swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing like it was trying to escape. "I was trying to help. Thought maybe I could boost the signal, in case Alpha's reception was as spotty as ours." "But," Pascal groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. "But what, Pax? Did you invite them for a bloody barbecue?" Selby, ever the optimist, chuckled darkly from his workbench. "Let me guess. You gave us a neon sign saying 'Free Humans' here." Sloane arched an eyebrow, leaning back with the kind of ease only someone truly resigned to cosmic misfortune could muster. "What did you do, Pax?" "I, kind of increased the output. By a lot," Pax explained, each word dragging him deeper into the pit he'd dug himself. Jax rubbed his temples, feeling the beginnings of a migraine that could rival a small supernova. "So you boosted our signal, potentially broadcasting our location to the entire sector, including the Zarklots." "Yeah," Pax admitted, voice small and quivering like a leaf in a hurricane. "I didn't mean to. Intentions don't matter much when we're all vapor." Sloane cut in, her tone sharp enough to sever a limb. Jax took a deep breath, counting to 5, then realizing that counting wasn't going to solve a damn thing. "All right, damage control. Selby, how long do we have before they start sniffing around?" Selby scratched his chin, calculating with grim precision. "Based on our luck, not long. Maybe ours if we're really unlucky." "Best case scenario?" Jax asked, though he wasn't sure why he bothered. "We're already dead," Selby replied, not missing a beat. "Just don't know it yet." Pascal let out a theatrical sigh, his hands wandering to his collection of makeshift explosives. "Well, time to get cozy with these little beauties." Sloane shrugged, a smirk playing on her lips. "Guess it's a good thing you love your job, Pascal." Pax, feeling lower than a Zarklot's conscience, ran a hand through his hair nervously. "I'm sorry, guys, really I am. Save the apologies," Jax said, already moving to the console to reassess their situation. "Just help us fix it." Norv, who had been observing with silent amusement, chipped in with his usual laconic charm. "Maybe the Zarklots will appreciate a good pyro show. Cultural exchange." "Right," Jax muttered, focused on the flickering screens. "Let's just ensure it's an exchange that doesn't involve us ending up as cosmic dust." The team sprang into action, each moving to their respective stations. Selby began rewiring the comm system with a speed that suggested he was part machine. Pascal meticulously arranged his explosives, muttering to them like a mother hen to her chicks. Sloane and Norv were on lookout duty, their eyes scanning for any sign that their uninvited guests were on the way. Pax, desperate to win back some trust, hovered around, helping where he could, trying not to get in the way. He had the air of a puppy that had gotten caught eating the couch, apologetic and eager to make amends. Think we can scramble the signal, confuse them a bit? Jax asked Selby, though he already knew the answer wouldn't be pleasant. Scramble, sure, might work, Selby replied, looking up with a knowing grin. But it's like trying to hide behind a sheet of glass. You can see through it and we'll still be screwed. Jax gave a grim nod. Great, so we've got a fat chance and a slim chance. Wonderful, Pascal, ever the optimist, winked at Pax. Hey Pax, look on the bright side. At least you didn't blow us up right away. Pax managed a weak smile. Yeah, I'll take that as a win. As Selby continued his frantic wiring, Jax paced the room, a storm cloud looking for something to strike. We can't afford to be discovered, he said, voice low and intense. We're not ready for a confrontation. Understatement of the century, Sloane muttered from her post by the entrance. But it's not like we've got a choice now, do we? Jax ran a hand through his hair, feeling the burden of leadership like a weighty crown of thorns. All right, listen up. We need a plan, something that'll buy us enough time to figure out our next move. Norv glanced over, his gaze thoughtful. What about the old decoy trick? Send a few signals in different directions, make them chase ghosts. Could work, Selby nodded, acknowledging the suggestion with a faint glimmer of hope. But I'll need a bit of time to rig that up. Time we might not have, Pascal added, looking at his wristwatch like it had personally betrayed him. Well, then we better hurry the hell up, Jax concluded, already moving to help Selby. We're not going down without a fight. As the team hustled and bustled, the air in the command center grew thick with tension and determination. They weren't heroes, but they were survivors. Grim, cynical, and stubborn as hell. Pax, eager to contribute, hovered around Selby, handing him tools and trying to make himself useful. What can I do to help? He asked, his tone earnest. Selby shot him a quick glance, then tossed him a bundle of cables. Here, kid, hold these and try not to touch anything that looks important. Pascal couldn't resist a jab. Yeah, unless you plan on changing your name to the human antenna. Pax chuckled, a bit of his initial nervousness dissipating. I'll do my best, Jax, focused on the task at hand, directed his team with the precision of a seasoned commander. Norv, Sloane, keep an eye on those sensors. We need to know the second we've got company. Got it, Norv replied, already tapping into the system. Let's hope they're fashionably late. Sloane, ever pragmatic, leaned back with her arms crossed. Or better yet, they decide to skip the party altogether. Wishful thinking, Jax remarked, the corners of his mouth twitching in a wry smile. But let's not bank on it. As minutes ticked away like grains of sand in an hourglass, Selby's hands moved with speed, the kind that comes from years of fixing things that had no business being fixed. All right, he said finally, stepping back from the console. I've got a rudimentary decoy set up. It's not perfect, but it might buy us a bit of time. Perfect isn't in our vocabulary, Jax replied, nodding his approval. Good work, Selby. Let's hope it's enough. The tension in the room was palpable, each of them acutely aware that their survival hinged on the whims of fate. They'd done all they could, and now all that was left was to wait. Pax, still feeling the weight of his earlier mistake, shifted uncomfortably. I'm really sorry, guys. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Water under the bridge, kid, Pascal said, clapping him on the shoulder. Just remember, next time you decide to play tech wizard, maybe run it by us first. Pax nodded, his expression earnest. I will, promise. Norv, glancing up from his screens, offered a rare grin. Hey, Pax, look on the bright side. We've all done worse. Yeah, Sloane agreed, her tone lightening. Like that time Norv almost blew us up trying to fix the airlock. Hey, Norv protested, though his eyes twinkled with humor. That was an accident, and technically it wasn't my fault. Sure it wasn't, Pascal said, laughing. But we survived, didn't we? Just like we'll survive this. Jax, listening to the banter, felt a flicker of optimism. It wasn't much, but it was something. His team wasn't perfect. Hell, they were far from it, but they were his, and together they'd navigate whatever cosmic joke the universe decided to throw their way. All right, team, Jax said, clapping his hands to get their attention. Let's keep our eyes peeled and our fingers crossed. We've got a long day ahead of us, and we need to stay sharp. As they returned to their tasks, the command center felt alive with a buzz of camaraderie and determination. They might be a ragtag group of misfits, but they were survivors. And in a galaxy that seemed determined to wipe them out, that was a victory in itself. The seconds ticked by, each one heavy with tension. And yet, in the midst of it all, they found solace in each other's presence. Perhaps, Jax mused, that was the true secret to their survival. Not technology or strategy, but sheer stubbornness and a sense of humor dark enough to rival the void itself. Let's keep the faith, Selby murmured, a faint smile on his lips as he adjusted the controls. And maybe, just maybe, we'll get through this. Faith, Pascal scoffed, though there was a twinkle in his eye. You sure you're on the right ship, Selby? Selby chuckled, giving him a playful shrug. Hey, a little faith never hurt anyone. Besides, it beats the alternative. Jax watched his crew, feeling a rare moment of peace amidst the chaos. They'd face whatever the cosmos threw at them. And with a bit of luck, they'd emerge on the other side, battered but still standing. All right, Jax said, gathering them together one last time. Let's get back to it. We've got a galaxy to piss off. With that, they returned to work, each of them ready to confront whatever lay ahead. For better or worse, they were in this together. And that, Jax realized, was the one thing the Zarklots could never take away. At least not without a hell of a fight. The lights flickered above the Mercury base command center, casting shadows that danced like phantoms over the weary faces of its inhabitants. Jaxar Thrum, with his stormy demeanor, was pacing, each step a metronome ticking towards oblivion. The failing power supply was the least of their problems, but it was the most immediate. At least until the Zarklot ships made their grand entrance. Someone remind me why we're buried under a rock on a dead planet, Sloane drawled, leaning against the console with a resigned slump. Her sarcasm was her shield, razor-sharp and always ready. Oh, right. Because we're idiots, Pascal, forever the patron saint of grim humor, grinned as he tinkered with a circuit board that might as well have been held together with hope and spit. Idiots in the best company, Sloane. Welcome to the elite club. Selby Riffle was elbow-deep in wires, a wiry figure with a penchant for cosmic jokes as dark as the void outside their bolt hole. If you think about it, there's something poetic about dying under Mercury's surface, almost like being buried at sea, but with fewer fish and more hellish temperatures. Pax, the rookie who was still trying to scrape the guilt off his conscience, hovered nervously. He looked like a man who had accidentally detonated a nuke with a sneeze. Is there anything I can do? Yeah, Norv piped up from his perch by the radar, his tone dry as bone. Pray to whatever deity oversees cosmic screw-ups. Maybe they'll pity us. Jax, laser-focused on their impending doom, spared Pax a glance. Just stay out of the way, Pax. We're beyond the help of earnest enthusiasm right now. The status screens on which they'd pinned their fragile hopes continued their epileptic fit. Each flicker was a reminder of their imminent discovery. The Zarklots were out there, probing the void with the persistence of a debt collector at month's end. All right, Jax barked, pulling them back to the present crisis. Power's down to 30%. If we hit 0, this base becomes our tomb. Lovely, Sloane said, her voice oozing with sarcasm. And here I was hoping for beachfront property. Still preferable to sharing a cell with Zarklots, Pascal replied, not looking up from his makeshift explosives. Heard they're not big on hospitality. Selby, with a spark of mischief in his eyes, added, unless you count being a science experiment as hospitality. Noted, Jax grumbled, knocking a stubborn loose wire into place, hoping it would decide to cooperate. Everyone focus, we're not dead yet. Keywords being not yet, Norv muttered, eyes glued to his sensor readouts. The team kept at it, the air in the command center growing thicker with every passing second. The darkness outside felt like it was creeping in, wrapping around them like a constrictor, tightening its grip. Each of them knew the stakes, felt the pressure, but giving up wasn't in their vocabulary. What's the plan if they find us? Pax asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jax paused, meeting his gaze with steely eyes. We improvise. Badly, in their line of work, death was always a possibility, but today it felt less like a distant concept and more like an impatient guest tapping its watch. The Zarklots were closing in, and Mercury base was a sitting duck, albeit one buried under a few tons of rock and metal. Maybe they'll pass us by, Selby suggested, though his tone suggested he had as much belief in that as he did in fairy tales. With any luck, they're as blind as they are ugly, and here I thought I was the optimist, Pascal quipped, shaking his head, but I'm pretty sure we're on their to-do list. Sloane snorted, crossing her arms. Let's just hope we're not number one with a bullet. The comm system crackled ominously, a reminder of their precarious situation. If the Zarklots didn't find them, their failing tech might finish the job for them. Jax took a deep breath, the weight of leadership a heavy mantle on his shoulders. We need a contingency, something that keeps us from being vaporized. Can't we just throw Pax at them? Norv suggested, earning a few chuckles despite the tension. Pax managed a smile, albeit a shaky one. I'm sure my charm will win them over. Always a plan B, Jax said, a wry smile ghosting his lips. They continued their work in a silence punctuated only by the occasional muttered curse or the clatter of tools on metal. Time felt elastic, stretching and contracting around them as they fought to outpace the inevitable. Think we'll get a break? Sloane asked, her eyes scanning the room. She was the voice of their collective weariness, the question hanging like a sword over them all. If we do, it'll be because the universe is on lunch break, Pascal said with a smirk, and I doubt it clocks out. Jax resisted the urge to slam his fist into something metallic and solid, opting instead for a steadying breath. All right, let's see where we stand. Norv, any sign of our unwelcome guests? Norv squinted at the flickering display, his expression a chiaroscuro of skepticism. Nope. But that doesn't mean they're not out there. Great, Jax muttered. We're blind, but at least we don't have to look at their ugly mugs. Selby leaned back from his work, wiping his hands on his trousers. The decoy should still be running, might buy us a few precious minutes. Minutes, Sloane echoed. Enough time to write our wills. Speak for yourself, Norv said. I plan on going out in a blaze of glory. Pax, trying to keep his spirits up, added, at least we'll go out with a bang. The silver lining, Pascal agreed, giving him a thumbs up. Jax's mind raced, trying to connect dots that refused to line up neatly. All right, folks, keep your heads down and your wits sharp. We're not out of this yet, considering our circumstances, Sloane said. I'd say we're knee-deep in it. The power levels continued their slow, inexorable descent. Each percentage point lost a countdown to their demise. The Zarklots hadn't found them yet, but it was only a matter of time before their luck ran out. Selby, can we stretch our power reserves any further? Jax asked, though he already knew the answer. Selby shook his head, grim amusement dancing in his eyes. Not unless you've got a spare reactor in your back pocket. Damn, Jax exhaled, running a hand through his hair. All right, we go with what we've got. The room was a cacophony of frantic activity, the team working with a desperation born of necessity. They'd been through hell and back together, and each of them knew that this might be their final stand. If we get out of this, Sloane said, voice low, I'm taking a vacation, somewhere nice, with no homicidal aliens. Count me in, Pascal replied, his grin a flash of defiance. I hear Mars has great beaches. Yeah, Mars, Selby said, chuckling. If you like dust storms and red rocks. Better than here, Sloane pointed out, her tone a touch wistful. The command center was their world, a fragile bubble of light and sound against the encroaching darkness. And yet, even as the shadows closed in, there was a spark of determination that refused to be snuffed out. Time's ticking, Jax reminded them, his voice a steady anchor in the storm. Let's move. Each of them worked with renewed vigor, the knowledge of their mortality lending a sharp edge to their actions. They were a ragtag group of survivors, each with their own scars, but together they formed a patchwork quilt of resilience. Think we'll make it? Pax asked, his eyes reflecting the bleakness of their situation. Jax met his gaze, offering a rare smile. We've beaten the odds before. Not by much, Norv added, but there was a glimmer of hope in his voice. But hey, we're still kicking. Pascal slapped a final piece of duct tape onto a precarious bundle of wires, standing back to admire his handiwork. There, that should hold at least until we're all dead. Always the optimist, Sloane teased, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Someone has to be, Pascal shot back, his laughter infectious. The camaraderie was a balm against the terror that threatened to engulf them. They might be facing impossible odds, but they'd do it together, with sarcasm as their armor and dark humor as their shield. All right, Jax said, pulling them back to reality. Stay sharp, we're in for a rough ride. With that, they returned to their stations, each of them ready to face whatever came next. The Zarklots might have been closing in, but so long as they drew breath, they'd fight to see another day. Here's to hoping we live to regret this, Selby quipped, raising an imaginary glass. Jax nodded, his expression one of grim determination. To survival by any means necessary. As the power continued its downward spiral, the team braced themselves for the fight ahead. They were outmatched and outgunned, but they wouldn't surrender. Not without a fight, not while there was still a spark of defiance left burning in their hearts. The silence in the command center was broken only by the soft hum of machinery and the whispered promises of a team determined to defy the odds. They'd been through hell before, and if the universe thought it could break them, it was in for a rude awakening. Let's make them work for it, Jax said, a fierce light in his eyes. With a chorus of grim smiles and determined nods, they turned back to their tasks. The Zarklots were out there, waiting to pounce, but as long as they had breath in their lungs and fire in their hearts, they'd fight back, even if it was with humor as dark as the space surrounding them, and a tenacity that bordered on madness. The command center was a hive of frantic activity, the air thick with the smell of sweat, fear, and Brew 23, a concoction more likely to kill them than keep them awake. Jaxar Thrum, their stormy-eyed leader, was busy jabbing at the console like it owed him money. As if on cue, the status screens flickered like a cheap disco, reminding everyone that doom was not just a possibility but an enthusiastic participant in their little soiree. Hey, Jax, Sloane called, leaning against the console with a laziness only a seasoned cynic could muster. Find us a loophole yet, or are we still booked for a one-way trip to Zarklot Central? Jax shot her a withering look, the kind that could curdle milk. Keep yapping, Sloane. The universe needs more background noise. Speaking of noise, Pascal chimed in, not looking up from his circuit board held together by the engineering equivalent of crossed fingers. Anyone else hear that ominous hum, or am I just having a stroke? Selby Riffle, who never missed an opportunity for a cosmic joke, grinned from his bench. If you're stroking out, Pascal, you'll have to do it on your own time. You've got bigger problems than your mortality. Norv, ever the dry wit, chimed in. Maybe we should pray to whatever deities oversee this cosmic screw-up. Yeah, Norv, Sloane retorted, because the last thing we need is more celestial entities with a bone to pick with us. Meanwhile, Pax Fielder, the rookie eternally vibrating with nerves, was fidgeting in the corner. Guys, I was thinking. No one paid you to think, kid. Jax cut him off, though his tone was more brotherly uppercut than outright dismissal. Let's stick to breathing and sweating. Pax nodded, trying to blend in with the background as much as possible, which on Mercury base was akin to hiding behind a single sheet of toilet paper. A sudden thought hit Jax like a brick through a glass window. He straightened, an idea forming that might just be crazy enough to work. Hold up, he said, a slow, speculative smile creeping across his face. What if we could outsmart them? Sloane raised an eyebrow, her interest piqued. Outsmart the Zarklots, that's ambitious. What's next, teaching a rock to juggle? No, I'm serious, Jax insisted, tapping the console with renewed vigor. These Zarklots, they over-engineer everything. I mean, look at their tech, it's got more bells and whistles than a carnival. Pascal paused his tinkering, looking up with a glint of interest. You saying we exploit their complexity? Exactly, Jax replied, adrenaline spiking through him like a shot of Brew 23. Our tech might be considered primitive, but it's straightforward. We use that to our advantage. Norv, always skeptical, folded his arms. And how do you propose we do that without triggering every alarm they've got? A mischievous smile spread across Jax's face. Well, they've got advanced tech, but it's also prone to overload. Think of it like a fancy chandelier strung up with dental floss. Love it when you talk dirty, Jax, Sloane quipped. So what's the plan, Pascal? How's that circuit board coming along? Jax asked. Pascal shrugged, a lopsided grin on his face. It's held together by hope and spit, but give me a minute and I'll turn it into a masterpiece of human ingenuity. Translation, Selby interjected. He's going to jerry-rig the hell out of it and pray it doesn't explode. Precisely, Pascal said, his hands a blur of motion. We're going to give their systems a case of indigestion. Jax nodded, feeling the threads of a plan weaving together. All right, everyone, listen up. We're going to send them a signal when they can't resist tracing. But when they do, we fry them, Sloane finished, her eyes lighting up with the spark of daring. Like bugs in a zapper. Pax looked up, hesitant but hopeful. Won't they just trace it back to us? That's the beauty of it, Norv said, a rare grin breaking his stoic facade. We send it through so many loops they'll end up tracing it back to themselves, or at least waste enough time trying, Jax added. It's risky, but it's a chance. Better than waiting for them to knock on our door with a battering ram, Selby pointed out. All right, Jax said, clapping his hands together. Let's make some noise worth their time. The mood in the command center shifted from one of grim inevitability to cautious optimism. Fingers flew over consoles, tools clattered against metal, and for the first time in days there was a sense of purpose. Sloane took a deep breath, savoring the moment. If we pull this off, drinks are on me. Bravo, Pascal said, giving her a mock salute. Assuming there's anything left of us to drink. They say laughter is the best medicine, Selby remarked, but I'd settle for a stiff drink and a nap. Focus, people, Jax reminded them, though there was warmth in his voice. We're not out of this yet, but damned if we won't give it our best shot. Pax, buoyed by the newfound energy, asked, What do you need me to do? Keep an eye on the power levels, Jax instructed. If they drop too fast, we're screwed. On it, Pax said, his voice steady for the first time since they'd started this mess. Time stretched and contracted, the seconds ticking by in a symphony of clicks and beeps. Each person worked with a singular focus, their minds attuned to the task of survival. Ready, Pascal announced, holding up the circuit board with a flourish. It's not pretty, but it'll do the job. Jax took it, nodding his thanks. All right, let's set this plan in motion. The team gathered, each person contributing to the audacious gambit they were about to play. Their fingers danced over controls, creating a digital tapestry of chaos intended to baffle and bewilder. Sending now, Sloane said, her finger hovering over the final command. Hope they like surprises. Here goes nothing, Jax muttered, crossing his fingers. Or everything. The signal shot out into the void, a tantalizing breadcrumb for the Zarklots to follow. Their systems hummed with activity, each status screen flickering with the reflection of their hopes, a desperate gamble against insurmountable odds. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence was thick, an oppressive weight that pressed down on them, squeezing the air from their lungs. Then the status screens lit up like a holiday display, data streams racing across them in frantic lines of code. The Zarklots had taken the bait, their systems grappling with the unexpected intrusion. Looks like they bit, Norv observed, his tone as dry as ever. Now we just have to hope they choke on it, Pascal added, watching the screens with a gleam of satisfaction. Jax felt a swell of pride, tempered by the knowledge that they were far from safe. Keep an eye on those signals. We need to know if they are onto us. The minutes dragged by, each one an eternity in itself. But slowly, surely, the Zarklot systems began to falter, their over-engineered complexity proving to be their Achilles heel. We're doing it, Pax said, disbelief coloring his voice. It's actually working. Don't jinx it, kid, Sloane warned, though there was laughter in her words. Selby, ever the joker, raised an imaginary toast. To human stubbornness and good old-fashioned trickery. For now, Jack said, though he couldn't hide the pride in his eyes. But we're not out of the woods yet. or the rocks, Pascal noted, gesturing to their subterranean prison. Semantics, Selby replied with a shrug. They watched as the Zarklots floundered, their signals growing more erratic with each passing moment. The team had bought themselves time, precious, invaluable time. Looks like they're having a meltdown, Norv commented, satisfied. Good, Jack said, a fierce smile tugging at his lips. Now let's make sure we stay a step ahead. As the Zarklot systems continued their downward spiral, the team knew that they'd achieved a small victory in a much larger war. But for the first time, the odds didn't seem quite so impossible. Hope this buys us a little breathing room, Pax said, the tension easing from his shoulders. It better, Sloan replied, glancing at the flickering screens, or I'm going to be really pissed. Let's not count our victories yet, Jax cautioned, though his eyes shone with determination. We've got work to do. The team dispersed, each person returning to their stations with renewed vigor. They might be outmatched and outgunned, but they'd proven that they could hold their own in the face of overwhelming adversity. No matter what the universe threw their way, they'd meet it head-on, with sarcasm as their shield and dark humor as their sword. Here's to hoping they stay distracted, Selby quipped, a sly grin on his face. To survival, Jax echoed, his voice a steadfast promise. With their spirits lifted and their resolve strengthened, they returned to the task at hand. The Zarklots might be relentless in their pursuit, but so long as the team had breath in their lungs and fire in their hearts, they'd fight back with everything they had. Even if it meant outsmarting the universe's overly complicated plans, with nothing more than human ingenuity and a healthy dose of irreverence. Jaxar Thrum leaned back in the squeaky chair, watching the chaos unfold on the screens with the bemused detachment of someone who had nothing left to lose. The Zarklots were having a field day, if you could call panic and disarray a field day. It was like watching a high-tech opera where the soprano hit the wrong note and the whole production crumbled into farce. Look at him dance, Sloan said, her voice a sardonic drawl. Makes you wonder if they've ever seen their own shadows before. Pascal, soldering iron in hand, didn't even look up from his work. Probably think their tech is so advanced it can outsmart them. 2. No one had the heart to tell the Zarklots that they were being outmaneuvered by a mishmash of what amounted to intergalactic paperclips and duct tape. And Norv, with his dry wit, wasn't about to let the moment pass without comment. Never thought I'd see the day when alien overlords would be outwitted by the technological equivalent of a 2-bit magic trick, Norv said, arms folded across his chest like a disappointed teacher watching his students fail at basic arithmetic. Selby Riffle, never one to miss a cosmic joke, chuckled from his bench. I dunno, Norv. Magic trick sounds a bit too highbrow for this lot. More like a toddler's first attempt at sleight of hand. Pax, eyes glued to the power readouts, allowed himself a small smile. Hey, if it works, right? Keep that optimism in check, kid, Jack said, though his tone was light. Might start thinking you're actually enjoying this mess. Wouldn't dream of it, Pax replied, though the hint of hope in his voice was unmistakable. The plan, as harebrained as it was, had gone off without a hitch. The Zarklots, in their infinite wisdom and complexity, had tripped over their own feet. It was a testament to the fact that sometimes, just sometimes, being the underdog with nothing but grit in your teeth and a sarcastic quip on your lips could tilt the scale. Didn't think we'd actually pull it off, Sloan admitted, a rare confession slipping past her habitual cynicism. Neither did I, Jack said, echoing her surprise. But then I didn't think Brew 23 would ever pass as a legal beverage, and look where we are. Pascal set down his tools, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. We've bought ourselves some time. Let's not waste it patting ourselves on the back just yet. True, Jax agreed, though a note of relief had softened his otherwise stormy eyes. If they regroup faster than we anticipate, we're back to square one. Norv, examining the flickering data streams, nodded. And square one wasn't all that cozy to begin with. Cozy, Selby repeated, rolling the word in his mouth like a particularly sour candy. Funny word for being stuck underground on a planet that's practically a giant microwave, but you love it, right? Sloan teased, nudging him with her elbow. More than being vaporized by angry alien tech. Absolutely, Selby replied with a grin, though it's a close call. The tension in the room eased, replaced by a camaraderie born from shared peril and mutual mocking of doom. It was what they did best, laughing in the face of disaster, often because it was the only weapon they had. So what's next, fearless leader? Pascal asked, directing the question at Jax. Next, we keep our heads down and wait for them to get tangled in their own mess, Jax said, his gaze flicking over the console displays. If we're lucky, they'll be too busy trying to untie the knots to notice we're the ones who tied them, and if we're not lucky, Pax ventured, though he was already bracing himself for the answer. Then we figure out how to disappear faster than a politician's promise, Jack said, a wry smile pulling at his lips. Selby snorted. Good trick that. Speaking of tricks, Norv interjected. What's our power situation? Pax checked the readouts, the numbers glowing a reassuring green, holding steady at 30%. We're not exactly flush, but we're not in the red either. Better than expected, Sloan commented. Let's see how long we can ride that wave. Long enough to figure out our next move, I hope, Jack said. Because sitting here twiddling our thumbs isn't a viable long-term strategy. Well, color me shocked, Pascal said with mock surprise. You mean our survival doesn't hinge on idle thumb twiddling? It hinges on a lot of things, Jax replied, but mostly on making sure we stay 2 steps ahead of them, or at least 1 step in a good sprint, Selby added. Can't be too picky. The tension in the room might have eased, but the stakes remained as high as ever. The Zarklots might be temporarily distracted, but they weren't foolish. They'd come back angrier and more determined once they figured out what had hit them. Still, Pax said, a hint of wonder in his voice, it's kinda nice to see them on the back foot for a change. It is, Jax agreed. Just don't get too comfortable. Comfort's a luxury we can't afford. And so, with a plan executed and time momentarily on their side, the team retreated into a semblance of normalcy. Each person returned to their tasks, maintaining the fragile balance between hope and dread that had become their constant companion. Speaking of luxuries, Sloan said, her eyes on the monitors. Anyone up for a round of Brew 23? That stuff's more a punishment than a drink, Pascal retorted. But I'll take a cup, only because you've developed a masochistic taste for it, Selby teased. Or a death wish, Norv added, his dry sarcasm as sharp as ever. The banter continued, light-hearted yet tempered with the knowledge of the challenges that lay ahead. They'd bought themselves time, but the clock was still ticking, a relentless reminder that their problems hadn't disappeared, only delayed. Cheers then, Sloan said, raising an imaginary cup. To the next disaster, to surviving it, Jax added, his voice a steady, grounding force. The laughter that followed was genuine, if a bit rough around the edges. It was the laughter of people who knew that life was unpredictable, that survival was never guaranteed, and that sometimes the only thing you could do was roll with the punches and hope you landed a few of your own. Think they'll catch on? Pax asked, the question hanging in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Eventually, Jax said. But by then we'll have figured out our next move. Always 1 step ahead, huh? Sloan said, a smirk playing on her lips. Just how we like it. Exactly, Jax replied, determination threading through his words. And if they think they can outlast us, they've got another thing coming. With resolve as their guide and humor as their armor, the team continued their work, each person contributing to the collective effort to stay alive and maybe, just maybe, turn the tables on their alien adversaries. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, the scales felt a little less uneven. And that in itself was worth a toast, real or imagined, to human cleverness, stubbornness, and the unyielding spirit of those who refused to go quietly into any good night. As the Zarklots scrambled to untangle the web they'd inadvertently woven, the team at Mercury base prepared for whatever came next. They weren't out of the woods or the rocks, but for now they'd take the small victories where they could find them. Here's to hoping they stayed distracted, Selby quipped again, never one to let a good line go to waste. To survival, Jax echoed, his voice carrying the weight of their shared struggles and the promise of more to come. With that, they returned to their work, united in purpose and fortified by the knowledge that no matter what the universe threw their way, they'd face it together, with sarcasm as their shield and dark humor as their sword. And in the vast, unforgiving expanse of space, that might just be enough. Jaxar Thrum leaned back a little further in his chair, a precarious maneuver because it might just collapse and dump him on his ass. But that wouldn't be the worst thing to happen today, not by a long shot. With the alien threat slightly receding, the atmosphere in the Mercury Base Command Center was like a storm that had decided to take a coffee break before coming back twice as pissed. So Jax began, strumming his fingers on the console like he was about to launch into a rock ballad, "We're Not Dead Yet." What's next on the not being vaporized agenda? Sloan, ever the queen of the sardonic drawl, stretched her legs out, crossing them at the ankles like she had all the time in the universe. How about we start with a round of Don't Get Caught, followed by Survive Another Day? Sounds like a plan, Jax nodded. A vague, reckless, barely tied-together plan. My favorite kind, Pascal, fiddling with wires like they were the strings of a particularly moody harp, huffed. I'd settle for a plan where I'm not the one holding everything together with spit and hope. You saying my soldering ain't good enough. Sloan teased, though her eyes were glued to the flickering monitors, the glitches giving her a headache she'd gladly trade for a broken limb. Because I'll have you know it's artisanal, like that moonshine you tried to pass off as Brew 23, Selby chimed in, grinning as he wiped his hands on a rag that had seen better days, much like the rest of them. Exactly like that, Sloan shot back, except the soldering won't make you blind. No guarantees about the moonshine, Pax, the rookie with more nerves than sense, watched them banter with a mix of awe and what the hell am I doing here? Is it always like this? He asked, eyes darting between them like a spectator at a particularly cynical tennis match. Pretty much, Norv answered, his arms folded in that way that made him look like he was about to dish out the wisdom of the ages, or at least a decent knock-knock joke. If you're looking for calm and collected, you might want to try the next apocalypse over, or just get used to it, Jax added, the lines around his eyes deepening as he chuckled. We're not exactly known for our serene dispositions, so are we really planning the future? Pax pressed, his voice tinged with hope, a dangerous commodity in their line of work. Planning might be a stretch, Jax said, but we're thinking about it. Somewhere past the Zarklots and the death traps there's a future. Imperfect, maybe dystopian, but ours. Maybe we rebuild, Sloane mused, tapping her chin thoughtfully. Fix up the old places, make him better. Less prone to spontaneous combustion. Pascal raised an eyebrow. Rebuild with what? We've got circuit boards held together with the technological equivalent of bubblegum. Start small, Selby suggested, shrugging. One less death trap at a time. Rome wasn't built in a day, and it sure wasn't built with alien overlords breathing down their neck. Rome also had an economy, Norv pointed out, his tone dry as a desert. All we've got is a prayer and a pack of jokers. Jokers with style, Sloane corrected, adjusting her seat, and an uncanny knack for surviving. Don't forget the charm, Selby added, winking. We're basically the full package, the kind of package you find on your doorstep and wonder who the hell thought it was a good idea to send, Jax said, unable to keep the grin off his face. So we plan, Pax said, his enthusiasm cautiously rekindling. Start figuring out what comes after surviving. Exactly, Jax said, nodding at the rookie's gumption. We've survived this long. Might as well think about what we're going to do with it, Pascal sighed, reluctantly optimistic. We're gonna need more than gumption. We'll have creativity, Sloane interjected. And if we're really lucky, some actually functioning tech that won't explode on us or implode, Selby corrected. Let's cover all bases. Fine, Norv conceded, but only if we can keep the sarcasm at peak levels. I'd hate to think we'd get boring, Jax spluttered. I'd rather roll around in a nest of Zarklot tech, which, by the way, we should probably get back to dismantling, Pascal reminded them, eyeing his soldering iron like it was a sword and he was about to dive into battle. Before it decides to have a meltdown, literal or metaphorical, Sloane asked. Why not both? Pascal replied, sighing. The laughter that followed was like a bomb, soaking into their bones and easing the tension that clung to them like a second skin. It was the kind of laughter that came from shared trials, from knowing that the universe was out to get you, but still managing to find the punchline. Seriously though, Jack said after the laughter subsided, we've got to think about rebuilding. If only so we have somewhere to retire to. Retirement, Selby echoed, as if savoring the word. Sounds like a myth worth pursuing, Jax replied, even if it's just for the chance to stop and breathe. Breathing, Sloane said, feigning surprise. Another luxury we can't quite afford, but one we'll keep fighting for, Pax said, a spark of determination in his eyes. You've got spirit, kid, Jax said, clapping a hand on Pax's shoulder. Just don't let it get you killed. If we're planning, Norv interjected, we'll need a list. Right, Pascal said, not missing a beat. Number 1, find a planet that doesn't hate us. Number 2, Sloane added, get more Brew 23. That stuff's practically a currency. And number 3, Selby concluded, get a decent sleep schedule. Haven't seen one of those in years. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, Jack said, his voice steady and grounding, let's make sure we're still here tomorrow. Amen to that, Norv agreed, his dry wit tempered with sincerity. With a collective sigh, they returned to the tasks at hand, the command center buzzing with a renewed sense of purpose. It was a fragile thing, this hope of theirs, but it was real and maybe even enough to get them through the next crisis. As they worked, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, the kind of inconsequential chatter that kept the darkness at bay. They talked about old Earth movies, debated the merits of various junk foods, and even speculated on what the Zarklots did in their spare time, besides terrorizing humans, of course. I bet they knit, Sloane said, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Yeah, knit doomsday devices, Selby retorted with a laugh. Or maybe they're into pottery. Pottery, Pax repeated, struggling to keep a straight face. That's an image. Hey, everyone needs a hobby, Pascal said, not missing a beat. Maybe we're their hobby, Norv suggested, his tone deceptively serious. All the rage in alien leisure activities. Befuddle the human. Best pastime there is, Jax agreed, his smile wry but genuine. In the end, it wasn't the big revelations or the grand plans that gave them hope. It was the small moments, the laughter, the camaraderie, the shared certainty that they were in this together. They might have been a ragtag bunch, but they were each other's ragtag bunch, and that counted for something. As the long hours stretched into longer ones, they kept at it, fixing, refining, and occasionally cursing at the stubbornness of their situation. They were researchers, engineers, and warriors all rolled into one, cobbling together a future out of the remains of a past that had tried to destroy them. Outside the base, Mercury's surface was as hostile as ever, the sun's unforgiving heat a constant reminder of their precarious situation. But inside, there was a sense of warmth, an intangible fire fueled by determination and defiant optimism. When morning came, though it was hard to tell on a planet with no real day-night cycle, they gathered around the command center's main display. The status screens were still flickering, but the data was settling into something resembling coherence. "Looks like we're stable," Pax reported, rubbing the back of his neck. "For now," Jack said, but there was a note of satisfaction in his voice. "And the Zarklots?" Sloan asked, raising an eyebrow. "Still tangled in their own wires," Norv confirmed. "We're ahead but not by much." "Good," Jack said, nodding. "Gives us time to breathe and plan," Pascal added, though he was already back to tinkering with a stubborn circuit board. "Always planning," Sloan said, sipping what passed for coffee in their supplies. "Keeps us sharp and alive," Selby said, raising an imaginary toast once more. "To the next disaster, to surviving it," Jax echoed, his voice a steady anchor in the chaotic sea of their existence. As they resumed their work, the command center filled with the sounds of quiet determination. It was a symphony of survival, dissonant and raw, but undeniably theirs. They had plans to make, a future to shape, and a universe to outwit, and if anyone could do it, it was this mismatched team of survivors. "Here's to not getting caught," Pax said, a grin creeping onto his face. "To not getting caught," they repeated in unison, the words a mantra that carried them forward into whatever awaited them next. They might have been battered, and their path was anything but clear, but they were still standing. And for now, that was enough.